How dare you, the daughter of a cleaning lady, marry my son? Consider this a gift. These shocking words echoed from the mother-in-law's lips as she slapped the bride across the cheek in the luxurious grand ballroom. 200 guests watched in stunned silence as the bride, holding back tears, lowered her head. But at that moment, a cold fury ignited in the eyes of the bride's father, John Anderson. Who was John Anderson truly? Everyone knew him as a modest business owner. What revenge was he planning for the family that had humiliated his daughter? How dare you, the daughter of a cleaning lady, marry my son? Consider that slap a gift. Susan Davies' piercing voice resonated throughout the hall. 200 guests froze instantly. A bright red mark bloomed on the bride, Sarah's pale cheek. How can a girl from a family like yours even think of marrying our son? Susan Davies coldly threw out again. Large tears streamed from Sarah's eyes, but she only clenched her teeth tighter and lowered her head. This scene, unfolding beneath the sparkling chandeliers of the opulent hall, was agonizingly contrasting. It was unbearable to see the bride humiliated at a moment when she should have been her happiest. "Mom, please don't. It's our wedding day." The groom, Michael, intervened hastily, but Susan Davies only shot her son a sharp glare. "You stay quiet. This is adult business. You have no place here." Michael dared not say another word, and glumly lowered his head. He had lived his entire life under the oppression of his authoritarian mother, lacking the courage to defy her. Guests began to whisper. Someone pulled out a phone and started filming, while others shook their heads and clucked their tongues. The atmosphere at the wedding instantly turned icy. Look at the bride's father. His face is green. Yes, I can imagine what he's feeling, having his daughter humiliated like that. Poor bride, to get caught up with such a family. The whispers of the guests grew louder. John Anderson, clenching his fists, observed it all. His face was contorted with cold fury. The feelings of a father who had raised and nurtured his daughter for 30 years were beyond words. Sarah subtly nodded to her father. It was a signal for him to hold back. Seeing his daughter's pleading gaze, John Anderson slowly closed his eyes, but in his soul, the flames of revenge were already burning. "Dad, it's okay. I'll endure it. We just need to get through today," Sarah whispered. But in John Anderson's heart, the fire of retribution already blazed. He, a man who had clawed his way up from the very bottom his entire life, possessed a unique strength. Susan Davies looked around with satisfaction. It seemed to her that everything was going according to her plan. She was pleased to have put the bride in her place and demonstrated her status to everyone. And from now on, know your place. Live quietly and don't disgrace our family. "Yes, Mom, I'll try." Sarah bowed her head even lower. At that moment, John Anderson felt his heart plummet. To see his daughter, whom he had cherished his whole life, humiliated was more painful than death. The wedding continued in a suffocating atmosphere. Guests continued to whisper, and the bride never lifted her head. Even the groom, Michael, constantly glancing at his mother, couldn't properly attend to his wife. "Congratulations. What a beautiful wedding." But even on the faces of those who spoke, awkwardness was written. "Yes, thank you." Formal congratulations were exchanged, but the atmosphere remained tense. Everyone felt uncomfortable, recalling what had happened. The photographer, capturing the wedding, held his camera distractedly. John Anderson didn't utter a word throughout his daughter's wedding. He just watched silently. But in his eyes, cold determination was fixed. He burned with the desire not to let today's incident go unaddressed. After the ceremony, Sarah approached her father. Tears still glistened in her eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry. I disgraced you." John Anderson gently stroked his daughter's head. "It's all right. The most important thing is for you to be happy. Don't worry about me." But in his heart, he was thinking of something entirely different. He was already planning a brutal revenge against Susan Davies and her Phoenix holdings. It seemed the time had come to use the power he had kept hidden for 30 years. That same night, John Anderson sat alone in his study. Documents related to Phoenix Holdings were spread on the table. Their website was open on his computer screen. "Susan Davies, you have no idea who I am, and you dared to touch my daughter." His voice was icy. John Anderson, who had climbed from the bottom his entire life, had a special ability: the ability to completely dismantle companies. "I will never forget how you humiliated my daughter today. You will definitely pay for this." John Anderson turned on his computer and began to gather information about Phoenix Holdings. His fingers flew across the keyboard. One by one, he launched company analysis programs he hadn't used in a long time. The retribution for the wedding humiliation would be unimaginably cruel. Susan Davies didn't yet know who she had messed with. She considered him merely a provincial father-in-law, a former cleaner. It was past 2 a.m. when John Anderson shut down his computer. He had already studied the basic financial structure of Phoenix Holdings. Outwardly, the company appeared prosperous, but he intuitively sensed that many problems lurked within. John Anderson had stayed at his computer until 2 a.m. Various data on Phoenix Holdings, financial statements, business plans, and information about subsidiaries were open on his monitor. He collected all available information. "Just as I thought, only the facade is beautiful. But inside, it's nothing but problems," he muttered. His experienced eye, the eye of a specialist who had spent 30 years analyzing company finances, clearly saw all of Phoenix Holdings' weak points. Seemingly insignificant signals were hidden everywhere, signals that an ordinary person would never notice. John Anderson's past was a tightly guarded secret. Outwardly, he was an ordinary business owner, but in reality, he was a financial investigation specialist feared even by large corporations. Only a select few knew his true biography. In his youth, as the son of a cleaning lady, he started from the bottom. He studied when others slept and worked when others socialized. After graduating with an accounting degree, he continued his education, obtaining all sorts of financial certifications. CPA, tax consultant, appraiser, he held every diploma in the financial field. As a result of his efforts, he managed to get a job at the country's largest auditing firm. It was there that he discovered his unique ability to find hidden problems in companies that outwardly appeared perfectly healthy. Initially, he handled regular audits, but gradually he was entrusted with increasingly complex and sensitive cases, uncovering financial fraud in major corporations, tracking illegal funds linked to politicians. Dozens of companies collapsed after John Anderson's analysis. Mid-sized companies involved in falsifying reports, large corporations creating secret funds, financial industrial groups evading taxes, all were exposed by his hand. He was dubbed the corporate liquidator. At that time, in business circles, the mere mention of John Anderson's name caused tension. Rumors that he was starting an investigation led to stock crashes. So precise and deadly was his analysis. But John Anderson no longer engaged in such activities. After the birth of his daughter, Sarah, he chose a quiet life. He ventured into a franchise business and lived discreetly. He never told his daughter about his past. "I just want to be a normal father to her. I don't want Sarah to be afraid of me," John Anderson whispered. But now, it seemed, the time had come to make a different choice, and the reason was Susan Davies. "My dear daughter, it's time to show them who your father is," John Anderson whispered, looking at a photo of his daughter. In the photo, Sarah in her wedding dress smiled happily, but at the actual wedding, she only cried. The next morning, John Anderson called his old colleague. He hadn't spoken to him in over 10 years. "Mark, it's me, John Anderson. Long time no see." The person on the other end, hearing John Anderson's voice, seemed surprised. The sudden call caught him off guard. "John Anderson, hello. So many years, what's happened? Are you back to your old ways?" Mark was now a lawyer at a large law firm. Previously, he and John Anderson had analyzed many companies together. He was one of those who best knew John Anderson's abilities. "I need your help. Heard about Phoenix Holdings? Phoenix Holdings? Yes, they're a mid-sized company, but lately they've been on the rise. Construction, distribution, manufacturing. They have diversified businesses. Why? I need to analyze them." At John Anderson's words, Mark tensed up. The fact that he was back to analyzing companies meant that hard times were ahead for someone. "If you're on the case, it must be serious. Is it something personal?" "They touched my daughter." That single phrase was enough for Mark to understand everything. He knew perfectly well how much John Anderson loved his daughter and could imagine what end awaited those who dared to anger him. I understand. I'll gather all the information I have. Give me a few days. Thank you. Do everything as thoroughly as before. John Anderson also contacted other former colleagues, accountants, tax consultants, financial experts. No one could refuse his request. They were bound by trust and friendship, proven over years of working together. The network of connections, built over 30 years, began to move again. Everyone, in their respective fields, started gathering information about Phoenix Holdings. It was as if a spider web had begun to operate. John Anderson single-handedly analyzed Phoenix Holdings' financial statements. Outwardly, they looked impeccable, but upon closer inspection, oddities emerged. Strange cash flow. Revenue is growing, but real money is scarce. This is a clear sign of funding problems. In his experience, such a pattern most often indicated the presence of secret funds or financial fraud. Such a cash flow could not be explained by normal commercial activity. Need to dig deeper. They're definitely hiding something. John Anderson analyzed the data all night. Susan Davies didn't yet know who she had messed with. She considered him merely a father-in-law from a simple cleaning lady's family, but soon she would realize her mistake. At 3 a.m., John Anderson's eyes were glued to the monitor. He was tracking Phoenix Holdings' overseas transfers. Step by step, he unraveled the complex structure of international transactions. What is this? Strange. The numbers on the screen caught his attention. $800 million had been transferred to an overseas company, presumably a shell corporation, through a complex chain of intermediaries. In a normal commercial transaction, such a complicated route would be unnecessary. This was a clear way to conceal money. John Anderson had seen such schemes hundreds of times and recognized it at first glance, just as I thought. My suspicions are confirmed. A cold smile appeared on John Anderson's face. 30 years of experience had not failed him. Phoenix Holdings definitely had hidden illicit funds. He began to dig even deeper. He tracked the real owners of the overseas shell companies and, step by step, followed the movement of funds. Like unraveling a ball of yarn, he dismantled the complex structure. Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Singapore. Money passed through several countries. There was only one reason for creating such a complex structure: to hide the origin of the money. By 4 a.m., the overall picture began to clear. Phoenix Holdings was, on the surface, a reputable company, but in reality, it served as a conduit for laundering various illegal funds. Kickbacks from contractors, fictitious transactions to evade taxes, and even funds for lobbying in political circles. It was all connected. Rarely would one encounter a company involved in so many different illegal activities. Susan Davies, the moment you slapped my daughter's cheek, your family was doomed. John Anderson's voice was filled with confidence. This evidence was enough to completely destroy Phoenix Holdings. They faced not only a Department of Justice investigation, but also an IRS audit. The next morning, John Anderson called Mark. His voice was full of certainty. "Mark, I've prepared everything. We can meet this afternoon." "Yes, John Anderson. Did you find something?" "Your voice sounds serious." "I uncovered a secret fund of $800 million. And that's just the beginning." Mark held his breath. $800 million was a deadly amount for a mid-sized company. And if John Anderson said it was just the beginning, then the real amount was much larger. "I'll come to your office at 3 o'clock. Do I need to prepare anything?" "I've prepared the materials so you can provide a legal assessment. Take a look and give me your opinion." At this time, a normal day began at Phoenix Holdings. Susan Davies was pleased to have taught her daughter-in-law a lesson. She even boasted about it to her friends. "That cleaning lady's daughter won't dare open her mouth now. I made it clear where her place is at the wedding," Susan Davies proudly told her friends, as if she had accomplished a great feat. "That's right. It's important to show who's in charge right away. It'll be easier later." Yes, young people today are completely out of control. Her friends agreed with Susan Davies, but they didn't know who she had messed with. At 3 p.m., Mark arrived at John Anderson's office. In his hands was a thick folder of documents, the primary information he had gathered. "Ah, Phoenix Holdings. John Anderson. This is just incredible, Mark exclaimed, reviewing the materials John Anderson had prepared. He was amazed at how such an enormous volume of information could be gathered in just 2 days. There are 12 overseas shell companies alone. The size of the secret fund is no less than $2 billion. John Anderson commented in detail, pointing to the documents. The information Mark had gathered perfectly matched his analysis. This is enough for simultaneous Department of Justice and IRS investigations. Yes, and here's something even more shocking. Mark pulled out another document. These were materials proving connections to politicians. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent annually on lobbying in political circles. This could become a very high-profile case. John Anderson nodded. The problem was much more serious than he had anticipated. This was not just a corporate crime, but a major case linked to politics. Good. Now, we begin in earnest. After 30 years, I draw my sword again. Cold determination was fixed in his eyes. It was time to make them pay for humiliating his daughter. The employees of Phoenix Holdings knew nothing yet, but soon a powerful hurricane would engulf them. The hurricane, named John Anderson, was bearing down on them. John Anderson began to act systematically. He leveraged all his connections, accumulated over 30 years, to investigate Phoenix Holdings' crimes. A dense, spiderweb-like network became active. The first person he called was his old colleague, Auditor Peter. Peter was now the head of a mid-sized auditing firm, but hadn't forgotten his friendship with John Anderson. John, so many years, what brings you to call? Peter, do you know Phoenix Holdings? I've had dealings with them. Phoenix Holdings? Oh, that company. A couple of years ago, they had an IRS audit, but everything went smoothly. Our firm advised them back then. Didn't notice anything strange at the time. Peter pondered for a moment. Although several years had passed, something stuck in his mind. By the way, there was something odd about their overseas transactions. The amounts paid for services didn't match the actual content of those services. Why are you suddenly asking? Details later. Do you still have the materials from that audit? Of course, all tax audit materials are stored for the legally mandated period. If you need them, just ask. That same evening, Peter handed John Anderson the materials from Phoenix Holdings' IRS audit. The thick folder contained everything they had reviewed at the time. Look, the amounts paid for overseas services are too large. They don't match the actual content of the services. Even then, it seemed suspicious, but there wasn't clear evidence, so the case was closed. John Anderson, examining the materials, found not one but several suspicious points. Traces of fictitious transactions were everywhere. So, their problems started even back then. Thank you, Peter. You've been a great help. The next day, John Anderson met with the head of one of Phoenix Holdings' contractor companies. This meeting was arranged by Mark. It was a man in his 50s, owner of a small construction firm. Please tell me, did you have any problems working with Phoenix Holdings? The contractor's face darkened, as if an abscess had burst, unleashing all the accumulated resentment. Problems? There were countless. They constantly drive down contract prices and delay payments. They talk about cooperation, but in reality, they just bleed us dry. What exactly happened? When signing a contract, the price is one thing, but then they unilaterally demand it be lowered. If you refuse, they threaten to change contractors. Do you have any proof? Of course, it happened more than once. I collected everything, thinking it might come in handy someday. The contractor pulled out a thick folder. It contained various documents confirming Phoenix Holdings' abuses. Contracts where the price differed from the actual payment amount, notices of unilateral price reductions, official letters complaining about delayed payments. Everything was there. There were even recordings of phone conversations. This is enough for a complaint to the Federal Trade Commission. Right. But what can we, a small company, do against a large corporation? We have to put up with it. We need to live. John Anderson was furious at the contractor's words. Phoenix Holdings' behavior, preying on the weak, disgusted him even more. You don't have to endure it anymore. I'll solve this problem. A few days later, an unexpected informant appeared. A former employee from Phoenix Holdings' accounting department. She was contacted through Mark's acquaintances. Hello, my name is Emily. I worked at Phoenix Holdings 5 years ago. Hello. How can I help you? I heard you're investigating Phoenix Holdings. I have materials that might help you. Emily carefully pulled out a USB drive. Her hands trembled slightly. Here are materials related to the secret fund. I secretly copied them when I resigned. Why did you keep them? I knew they would come in handy someday. You wouldn't believe the dirty business they're involved in. My conscience wouldn't let me stay silent. The USB drive contained shocking information. Hundreds of millions of dollars in expenses, conducted with fake receipts, data on non-existent overseas transactions, lists of donations to politicians. Everything was there. Is this real, not fake? No, I processed these operations myself. At the time, I was under so much stress that I decided to keep the evidence. I had to create fake documents and process fictitious transactions under the direction of the accounting manager. John Anderson thanked Emily. Testimonies and materials from an insider were extremely important. You've helped me greatly. If you know anyone else who can help, please connect me with them. Yes, there are a few other former colleagues. They probably had similar problems. I'll contact them. A week later, John Anderson's desk was piled high with materials proving Phoenix Holdings' crimes: creation of a secret fund, tax evasion, abuse of contractors, lobbying in political circles. All criminal activities were exposed. This is enough. So much evidence has been gathered that investigations can be launched by the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the Federal Trade Commission. John Anderson muttered with satisfaction. Preparations for the complete destruction of Phoenix Holdings were complete. Susan Davies still didn't understand the enormous mistake she had made, but soon she would understand. She would understand that John Anderson was not just a father-in-law. Sarah was having dinner with her husband, Michael, in their new apartment. A week had passed since the wedding, but the incident at the ceremony still bothered her. Suddenly, the phone rang. Hello. When Sarah answered, she heard a cold voice. It was Susan Davies. Is that you, daughter-in-law? It's Susan Davies. Oh, hello, Mom. Is something wrong? Your father is doing something strange with our company. They say he's investigating something. Sarah didn't understand what she was talking about. She knew nothing about her father's investigation. I don't understand what you mean. What is my father doing? Don't pretend. I know everything. That your father is digging into our company, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Susan Davies' voice grew sharper. It was not at all the refined voice she usually used. Tell your father to stop, or your married life will turn into hell. I won't let this go. Mom, what did my father do? I really don't know anything. Susan Davies hung up without answering. Sarah stared at the phone, bewildered. The sudden threats shocked her. Honey, what's wrong? You look pale, Michael asked, concerned. Your mom said my dad is investigating something at the company. I don't understand what she means. She called and threatened for him to stop. Michael's face tensed. He had noticed his mother had been very nervous lately. And there was some anxiety at the company. It must be a misunderstanding. What can your father do? He's just a regular business owner, a franchise owner. But, contrary to Michael's words, Susan Davies' threats became more serious. She started calling Sarah one after another. That same night, she called again. This time, the threats were even more explicit. If your father doesn't stop, your husband will be fired from the company. One word from me is enough. Mom, please, no. I'll talk to my father, although I really don't know what's going on. Yes. Tell him clearly. If he touches us, we won't let it go. Tell him to prepare for how miserable your married life will become. Susan Davies hung up again. Sarah looked at her husband in tears. Honey, what should we do if your mom keeps threatening like this? Michael was also at a loss. Knowing his mother's character, he understood that this situation would not be resolved easily. Sarah called her father in tears. She couldn't bear it alone anymore. Dad, it's me, Sarah? Yes, honey. What happened? Your voice sounds strange. Did something happen? Mom keeps calling and threatening. She says you're conducting some investigation at the company. She says if you don't stop, our married life will turn into hell. John Anderson's face turned icy. He was furious that Susan Davies dared to personally threaten his daughter. What else did she say? She said our married life would turn into hell and threatened that Michael would be fired from the company. Dad, are you really doing something? At that moment, John Anderson's anger exploded. Not only had she humiliated his daughter, but now she was personally threatening her. Okay, I understand. Don't worry, Dad will take care of everything. Dad, please stop. I'm fine. I can endure it, Sarah cried. She was afraid that even bigger problems might arise because of her father. No, I won't endure it anymore. This is not a problem that can be solved with patience. John Anderson's voice was filled with unwavering resolve. My dear daughter, it's time to show them who your father is. I won't let you suffer any longer. Dad, don't worry about anything. Just live happily. Dad will handle everything. No one will dare to treat you like that again. Hanging up, John Anderson clenched his fists. The fact that Susan Davies personally threatened his daughter was tantamount to a declaration of war. She had crossed all boundaries. Mark, it's me. We need to accelerate the plan. We can't wait any longer. Mark replied in surprise. What happened, John Anderson? Your voice sounds serious. Susan Davies started personally threatening my daughter. She says her married life will turn into hell and calls with threats. We can't wait any longer. Understood. I'll prepare all the materials, and tomorrow we'll submit them to the Department of Justice. Everything is already ready, not only to the Department of Justice, but also to the IRS and the Federal Trade Commission, and to the media. We'll finish them off with one blow, all at once. Yes, we'll do that. We'll start tomorrow morning. John Anderson. Susan Davies would soon realize what a mistake she had made. At this time, Susan Davies was having dinner with friends at an expensive restaurant. She proudly recounted how she had threatened her daughter-in-law yesterday. That old cleaning lady dared to touch us? Ridiculous. I made it clear to my daughter-in-law, yes, he doesn't know his place at all. You should have shown him who's boss from the beginning. Her friends agreed with Susan Davies, but they didn't know what a terrifying person she had messed with. Susan Davies' arrogance would soon be shattered. John Anderson's office looked like a war headquarters. Hundreds of pages of documents proving Phoenix Holdings' crimes lay on the table. Various pieces of evidence were systematized and stacked. Mark, how are the preparations for the Department of Justice? Mark, holding a thick folder of documents, replied. Confidence was written on his face. Everything is perfect, John Anderson. The prosecutor himself from the Economic Crimes Division will handle the case. He said that with such evidence, an investigation can be launched immediately. Good. What about the IRS? Peter is handling that. He said that preparations for the tax audit are complete. According to him, the amount of tax evasion exceeds $2 billion. John Anderson nodded. The network of connections, built over 30 years, was bearing fruit. Specialists from various fields were involved. What about the media? Yes. 3 journalists specializing in economic investigations are on standby. They are ready to release exclusive material. We have connections with all 3 major news networks and major newspapers, Mark replied confidently. An investigation of this magnitude would generate significant media interest. That same evening, John Anderson gathered everyone involved for a final check. Mark, Peter, the contractor's CEO, and former accounting employee Emily gathered in the office. All right, final check. Let's start with the materials for the Department of Justice. Mark laid out the prepared documents. A huge amount of material was systematized. Evidence of secret fund creation, 150 pages. Evidence of tax evasion, 200 pages. Evidence of lobbying in political circles, 100 pages. The source and reliability of each piece of evidence were indicated. Peter also brought out his materials. As a tax specialist, he had prepared perfect documents. Materials for the IRS audit, a total of 300 pages. Materials on overseas shell companies are also included. The complex overseas structure for tax evasion is analyzed in particular detail. The contractor's CEO also brought his systematized materials. They contained living testimonies of affected companies, evidence of abuses from 50 companies, This is enough for a serious penalty from the Federal Trade Commission. There are even recordings of phone calls, so everything is perfect. Former accountant Emily also handed over the latest materials. They contained key information known only to insiders. Materials for internal investigation. I only gathered the most important facts about the crimes. Falsification of accounting reports. Processing of fake receipts. The process of creating the secret fund. It's all here. John Anderson carefully examined all the materials. Even Mark, being a lawyer, was amazed at how perfect the documents were. John Anderson, with this, we can finish them off with one blow. I've never seen such perfect evidence, and that's how it should be. Susan Davies must pay for touching my daughter. Half-hearted revenge is meaningless. Cold determination was fixed in his eyes. His resolve, with which he drew his sword again after 30 years, was palpable. Tomorrow, at 9 a.m., we submit the complaint to the Department of Justice, simultaneously to the IRS. At 2 p.m., a press conference. We strike from all sides at once. Everyone nodded. The perfect triple siege was ready. Phoenix Holdings had no chance of escape. John Anderson. What if Phoenix Holdings suspects and tries to destroy the evidence? Mark asked, concerned. We won't give them time for that. If we strike from all sides simultaneously, they won't have time to react. That's the whole point. John Anderson's strategy was flawless, giving the enemy no time to react, destroying everything in one blow. At this time, Susan Davies was calmly watching a TV series at home. She had no idea what awaited her tomorrow. What can that old cleaning lady do to us? Just empty threats. He can't even handle his daughter-in-law himself. Susan Davies still looked down on John Anderson. She completely failed to grasp the enormous mistake she had made. The main office of Phoenix Holdings was also quiet. Employees had no idea about the storm that would begin tomorrow. Those staying late were busy with their usual tasks. John Anderson called his daughter Sarah one last time. He wanted to say goodbye to her before the revenge began. My dear daughter, starting tomorrow, no one will dare to treat you like that again. Dad, what are you talking about? Are you really doing something? Soon you'll know who your father is and how valuable a person you are. Dad, please don't do anything dangerous. I'm fine. This isn't dangerous. This is just restoring justice, so that the guilty pay for their actions. Hanging up, John Anderson looked out the window. Tomorrow, it would all be over. The cleaning lady's son he was 30 years ago now possessed the power to destroy a major corporation. Susan Davies, tomorrow morning will be the last peaceful time in your life. I will make you understand the high price of humiliating my daughter. With John Anderson's monologue, the last night before the revenge grew deeper. Everything was ready. All that remained was to act. The next morning at 9 a.m., materials concerning Phoenix Holdings were filed with the U.S. Department of Justice. Simultaneously, a complaint regarding tax evasion was submitted to the Internal Revenue Service. The perfectly conceived scenario began to unfold. The prosecutor, reviewing the materials, was astonished. He had never seen such systematized and complete materials for an indictment. This is just incredible. Who prepared everything so perfectly? It seems the complainant is a professional. With such materials, an investigation can begin immediately. At 10 a.m., Susan Davies, as usual, was having tea with friends in the lobby of an expensive hotel. She was boasting about how she had threatened her daughter-in-law yesterday. Suddenly, she was surrounded by journalists. Flashes popped, cameras rolled. Are you Susan Davies, wife of the Phoenix Holdings chairman? Yes. Who are you? What's happening? What do you think about the allegations of Phoenix Holdings creating a secret fund of $800 million? Susan Davies was bewildered. She didn't understand what was being talked about. The phrase secret fund was unfamiliar to her. What secret fund? What are you talking about? I don't know anything. Is it true that you laundered money through overseas shell companies? How do you comment on the abuse of contractors and delayed payments? The journalists' questions poured in one after another. Susan Davies' face turned green. She completely failed to understand what was happening. Wait, I don't know anything. What happened? What do you think about your behavior at your daughter-in-law's wedding? Flashes popped, cameras rolled. Susan Davies, covering her face with her purse, hastily departed. Her bewildered friends followed her. At the same time, Department of Justice and IRS agents simultaneously raided the main office of Phoenix Holdings. Several large vans stopped in front of the company building. Search warrant. Everyone stay in your places. What's happening? Show me the warrant. When an agent showed the warrant, Phoenix Holdings employees were in shock. The simultaneous visit from the Department of Justice and the IRS boded nothing good. We are seizing all accounting documents and computer hard drives. Open the safe. We need to check the cash and valuables. The search was conducted in all offices, from the chairman's office to accounting. Dozens of agents systematically gathered evidence. The office instantly turned into chaos. Employees whispered anxiously. What's going on? Why so sudden? Do you know what a secret fund is? I heard about it on the news. Where's the chairman? This happened. The chairman of Phoenix Holdings immediately rushed to the company, but it was too late. All accounts were frozen, and assets seized. What's happening? Why is all this happening? An investigation has been launched on charges of creating a secret fund and tax evasion. We ask for your cooperation. The chairman stared blankly as his office was searched. Everything he had built for 30 years was collapsing before his eyes. At 1 p.m., breaking news was released by the media. All TV channels and newspapers simultaneously began reporting on the events. Emergency broadcast. Mid-sized company Phoenix Holdings is under investigation by the Department of Justice on charges of creating a secret fund and tax evasion. Judging by the scale of the investigation, this is a major crime, amounting to over $2 billion. Susan Davies, watching the news at home, was in shock. She couldn't believe her eyes. What's happening? Who did this? What did we do wrong? At this time, her husband, the chairman of Phoenix Holdings, returned home. His face was gaunt. In one day, he had aged 10 years. Darling, what's happening? They're talking about us on the news. I don't know. The Department of Justice suddenly came with a search warrant. They said something about a secret fund. It seems they were completely prepared. One person came to Susan Davies' mind. The one she had been thinking about for the past few days. Could it be that old cleaning lady, the daughter-in-law's father? What nonsense? The chairman scoffed. But inwardly, he was uneasy. What can he do to us? It's absurd, just a coincidence. But Susan Davies' anxiety grew. The fact that this happened immediately after she threatened her daughter-in-law didn't seem like a coincidence to her. At 3 p.m., even more shocking news broke. This time, it concerned Susan Davies personally. Phoenix Holdings chairman's wife, Susan Davies, finds herself at the center of a scandal due to her behavior at her daughter-in-law's wedding. A video filmed at the wedding was published, and Susan Davies' face became known nationwide. The video, filmed by guests, began to spread on social media. Shocking footage. She slapped the bride across the cheek, stating that she could not accept the daughter of a cleaning lady into the family. Netizens were furious at Susan Davies' behavior. Insults poured into the comments. Susan Davies was desperate. Her life was crumbling before her eyes. At 6 p.m., the main office of Phoenix Holdings and the chairman's mansion were seized. Expensive handbags, luxury cars, jewelry, everything was impounded. This can't be. We can't collapse. We built this for 30 years. Susan Davies screamed, but reality was harsh. The wealth and power accumulated over 30 years vanished in a single day. That same evening, news featured a special report on the collapse of Phoenix Holdings. How could a mid-sized company collapse so quickly? Experts believe that perfect evidence and simultaneous investigations from all sides played a decisive role. Such a systematized indictment is impossible without the involvement of a professional. It seems someone meticulously prepared everything. Only then did Susan Davies understand. She understood who she had tangled with. She understood that he was not just a former cleaning lady's son. The next morning, all the country's news was dedicated to Phoenix Holdings. All media focused on the case. Phoenix Holdings chairman's wife, Susan Davies, publicly apologized on her knees. Susan Davies stood before journalists, head bowed. No trace of her former arrogance remained. Instead of luxurious clothes, she wore a modest suit. I deeply regret my mistake when I humiliated the cleaning lady's daughter. Taking her as my daughter-in-law, her voice trembled. The shock of her life changing in one day was evident. Especially my actions at the wedding, when I slapped the bride across the cheek, are inexcusable. I am deeply ashamed and sorry. Flashes popped, questions poured in. How do you intend to apologize to your daughter-in-law? I will meet with her personally and ask for forgiveness. Now I understand what a huge mistake I made. I will also sincerely apologize to my father-in-law. Do you believe your father-in-law is connected to this case? Susan Davies hesitated for a moment. Now she guessed who John Anderson was. I don't want to speculate, but I certainly know that I was very wrong. Susan Davies' apology was broadcast live on all TV channels. She humiliatingly apologized to the entire nation. At this time, Sarah watched the news in her new apartment. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She was filled with mixed emotions. "Honey, are you okay?" Michael asked, concerned. It was hard for him to see his mother suffer, but he was even more worried about his wife. "Yes, I'm okay. Just mixed feelings. Mom is probably going through a lot too." Sarah had complex feelings. It was hard for her to see her mother-in-law's life crumble. Anger and sympathy wrestled within her. Michael also felt uneasy. Although his mother was to blame, it hurt to see his family fall apart. "Honey, maybe we should visit Mom? We can't leave her alone in this situation." Sarah looked at her husband. She was grateful that he, despite the offense, thought of his mother. After lunch, John Anderson came to visit his daughter. He looked as usual, as if nothing had happened. "Dad!" Seeing her father, Sarah burst into tears. All her suppressed emotions erupted. "You've endured a lot, my dear daughter." John Anderson hugged his daughter. In her father's warm embrace, Sarah cried for a long time. "Dad, is it true you did what they're saying on the news?" "Yes, I couldn't bear to see you humiliated. As a father, I had to do it." Sarah cried for a long time in her father's arms. All her suppressed emotions erupted. The humiliation at the wedding, the threats, the calls, everything flashed before her eyes. "Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't know you were such a great man." "I'm not great. I just wanted to protect my daughter. Any father would do the same." John Anderson's voice was warm. The revenge was complete, and peace settled in his soul. "Never bow your head to anyone again. You are my daughter, and you must be proud. You are the most valuable and precious person in the world." "Yes, Dad. Now I will live with pride." Sarah nodded. Now she had the confidence that she would never again be humiliated by anyone. That evening, Michael came to greet his father-in-law. His attitude had completely changed compared to a few days ago. "Father-in-law, please forgive me. My mother acted very cruelly. I am so ashamed. You are not to blame. And now, everything is over. Let's think about the future." John Anderson treated his son-in-law warmly. The revenge had ended. It was time for reconciliation. The main thing is to take care of Sarah. That's what matters most. "Yes, I will definitely. I will make Sarah happy for the rest of her life." A few days later, Susan Davies herself came to see Sarah. No trace of her former arrogance remained. Deep remorse was etched on her haggard face. "Sarah, forgive me. Truly, forgive me." Susan Davies bowed low. It was the first time she had apologized to her daughter-in-law in such a way. "Now I understand how wrong I was when I treated you like that at the wedding. I didn't even know what a good person you are." Sarah looked at her mother-in-law. Instead of her former cold gaze, there was warmth in her eyes. "Mom, you must have had a hard time too. I understand you. Thank you for being so magnanimous to me. Now I want to become a truly good mother-in-law. I've realized that your happiness is the happiness of our whole family." They embraced. All misunderstandings and conflicts were in the past. True reconciliation had arrived. That same evening, John Anderson had dinner with his daughter at a quiet restaurant. They hadn't spent time alone together in a long while. "Dad, thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I would still be living with my head down. No need. You deserve to live with your head held high. I wanted to show you that. John Anderson took his daughter's hand. It was the warm touch of a father's hand. Just as I, the cleaning lady's son, made my way in life, so too should you live with pride. What matters is not your origin, but how you live. Yes, Dad, now I will live with pride, as your daughter. The humiliation that began in the wedding hall ended with a perfect revenge. John Anderson protected his daughter, and Sarah became a proud daughter-in-law. Susan Davies also became a mother-in-law who genuinely loved her daughter-in-law. Sometimes great trials change people. She recognized her mistake and sincerely repented. Sarah no longer bows her head to anyone. She inherited her father's strength and lives with pride. Her relationship with her mother-in-law was completely restored, and John Anderson once again became an ordinary father. The mission to protect his daughter was complete, and he no longer needed to draw his sword of revenge. True victory is not revenge, but the protection of a loved one. John Anderson handled this brilliantly, and the whole family found happiness again.